The moment I realized what I'd done, my entire world stopped spinning and then started rotating backwards, faster and faster, like someone had reversed the axis of everything I thought I knew about myself and my life, and the careful, controlled existence I'd been building brick by brick for the past 27 years. I was sitting on my worn gray couch in my tiny apartment, the kind of place that screams, "young woman trying to figure it out," with mismatched throw pillows and a string of fairy lights I'd hung up months ago that now felt painfully optimistic given the circumstances. And my phone was buzzing. Not the gentle buzz of a notification, but the aggressive, relentless kind of buzzing that suggests something is very, very wrong. And I couldn't quite make my trembling fingers work properly to unlock the screen and see what fresh hell was about to unfold. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hands, and I remember thinking with the kind of clarity that only comes with absolute panic that I should have been more careful, should have paid more attention to the name in the contact field, should have done about 1,000 things differently in the last 5 minutes. But time doesn't work that way, does it? You can't reverse 5 minutes any more than you can reverse a text message once it's been sent to someone who most definitely should not be receiving intimate photos of your body at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely see the screen, and the apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in with the kind of suffocating pressure that makes you understand why people talk about their hearts racing, because I could feel mine absolutely hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape through my chest cavity and find its way to safety, to anywhere but here, anywhere but this moment. The photo was already there, marked as delivered with that little check mark that felt like a death sentence, and beneath it was a message that had come through just moments after, a single word that appeared on the screen like a threat written in ice. Interesting. Nothing else, just that one word, and the lack of punctuation, the absence of exclamation points or question marks, or any kind of emotional indicator, was somehow more terrifying than if he'd written something angry or demanding or even crude. The silence that followed that message was deafening, a roaring emptiness that filled my apartment and my chest and my entire consciousness until I couldn't hear anything else, couldn't think about anything else, could only sit there on my couch and stare at that one word and wonder how I'd managed to destroy my life in the span of a single careless moment. I'd sent the photo to Marcus, my boyfriend of 3 months, or rather, the person I'd been seeing casually, keeping things light and fun and absolutely commitment-free because I wasn't ready for anything serious, or so I'd told, myself and him and anyone else who bothered to ask, and we'd been texting back and forth all evening, the kind of flirting that had started innocuous enough, but had gradually escalated into something more suggestive, more charged, the kind of banter that made me feel powerful and sexy and alive in a way that my actual life, filled with spreadsheets and office politics and fluorescent lighting, absolutely did not. I'd been feeling good about myself that night, had just come out of the shower and caught my reflection in the mirror and thought, for once, that I looked genuinely attractive, genuinely desirable. And instead of just thinking it and moving on like I usually do, I decided to capture that moment, to take a photo that showed my curves and my confidence and the way the light hit my skin in just the right way. And I'd felt like I was doing something daring and sexy and mature, something that proved I was a woman who could take control of her own narrative and her own desires. But I'd been texting with multiple people that night, which is the kind of detail that seems incredibly stupid in retrospect, but made perfect sense at the time when you're feeling yourself, and your phone is buzzing with attention from different men. And somewhere in the blur of conversations, and the careless way I was scrolling through my contacts looking for the right person to send the photo to, I'd made a catastrophic error in judgment that now felt like it might actually destroy me. I'd clicked on a contact saved simply as boss, which, in my alcohol slightly loosened state, and my confidence-inflated mindset, had seemed like no big deal at all, because boss was just a generic name, wasn't it? And I didn't even remember saving someone under that name. But there it was in my contact list. And I'd thought, God, I'd actually thought that it was maybe some random contact I'd saved and forgotten about, or possibly even a placeholder for something I'd meant to deal with later and never actually did. The implications of that single decision, that moment of negligence born from overconfidence and desire, and the intoxicating feeling of being wanted by multiple people, were only beginning to crystallize in my mind as I sat there on my couch at 9:15 on a Thursday night, and they crystallized in a way that felt like my consciousness was slowly drowning in ice water, understanding with increasing horror that I had just sent a photograph of my exposed body. A photograph that showed my face and my breasts and the intimate geography of my desire to someone in my phone contacts, someone important enough to be saved as boss, which could only mean one thing in the context of my life. One absolutely terrifying possibility that I couldn't quite make myself acknowledge out loud even in the privacy of my own mind. I finally managed to unlock my phone with shaking hands and pressed my finger against the conversation thread with desperate hope. Some tiny part of my brain still clinging to the possibility that this was a mistake, that there was another explanation, that I hadn't actually done what I thought I'd done. And then I saw it. A phone number that I didn't recognize, attached to the contact name Boss, and below that, a preview of the photo I'd sent. My own body staring back at me from the screen, and beneath that single devastating word, interesting. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight that I thought I might actually be sick, and I stumbled off the couch toward the bathroom, my hand over my mouth, my entire body shaking with adrenaline and regret, and a bone-deep fear that I'd never experienced before in my life. The apartment spun around me as I sat on the cold tile floor next to the toilet, my heart racing so violently that I thought I might be having a medical emergency, and I pressed my palms against the cool tiles, trying to ground myself, trying to find any solid ground in a world that had just become impossibly unstable and dangerous, and absolutely beyond my control. I tried to message him immediately, tried to explain that it was a mistake, that the photo had been sent to the wrong person, that he should delete it immediately and forget he'd ever seen it. And I typed out frantic apology after frantic apology, my fingers flying across the screen in a desperate attempt to undo what I'd done. But there was no response, no acknowledgement, just that one word sitting there like a stone at the bottom of my stomach. Interesting. I finally gave up around midnight, after 2 hours of staring at my phone, refreshing the conversation over and over again, hoping that somehow the message would change, that somehow I could think of the right words to say that would make this okay, that would make him delete the photo and forget about it and allow me to continue living my life without this sword hanging over my head. I didn't sleep that night, just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind running through increasingly catastrophic scenarios, imagining every possible terrible outcome, every way this could destroy me, every conversation I'd have to have at work if somehow this became known, every disappointed look on my mother's face, every violation of privacy and autonomy that I'd brought upon myself through my own recklessness and stupidity. By the time morning came, exhausted and gray and utterly unforgiving, I'd convinced myself that whoever this boss was, they were probably not actually a real contact, that the number was probably fake or disconnected, that this whole nightmare would resolve itself if I just ignored it and pretended it had never happened. And I clung to that fragile hope like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to sanity. I called in sick to work, spent the day in bed, tried to convince myself that everything would be fine, that I'd just been paranoid and dramatic, and that this was all going to blow over, but the weight in my chest wouldn't lift, the anxiety wouldn't release its grip. And by the time evening rolled around again, I was exhausted by the terror of it all, emotionally and mentally destroyed by the weight of my own mistakes. So the next morning, I woke up, showered, put on my professional clothing and my professional face, and decided that the only way forward was to pretend that nothing had happened, to go to work and do my job and act like I hadn't committed the cardinal sin of sending intimate photos to someone whose identity I couldn't even confirm, to pretend that I wasn't slowly dying of anxiety and shame and fear with every step I took toward my office building. The office was exactly as I'd left it. Fluorescent lights humming their unpleasant song, the smell of terrible coffee brewing in the break room, the constant background noise of phones ringing and people talking, and the general ambient chaos that comes with 50 people trying to work in an open floor plan without wanting to murder each other by noon. I moved through it like a ghost, keeping my head down, doing my job as the office manager, scheduling meetings and ordering supplies and pretending that I hadn't just fundamentally altered the course of my life through one moment of carelessness. And I was almost beginning to believe that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe whoever boss was didn't actually care. Maybe this would all just fade away into nothing when my computer chimed with a calendar invitation that made my blood run cold. The meeting request was from an extension I didn't recognize, attached to a name that made my stomach drop so far that I thought it might actually exit through my feet and onto the floor. And it was marked as urgent, scheduled for 15 minutes from now in the executive penthouse. And I knew with absolute, unwavering certainty that my carefully constructed world was about to explode into fragments that I'd never be able to reassemble into any recognizable shape. The message in the calendar invitation was blank, but it didn't need to say anything, because I already understood, in that moment, as I stared at that name and that extension, that whoever had received my photo was not some random contact at all. He was someone powerful enough to have absolute control over my schedule, someone important enough that his name alone was enough to send terror cascading through my entire body. And as I stood up on shaking legs and made my way toward the elevators, I had the distinct and overwhelming sense that my life had just fundamentally, irrevocably changed. And there was no way to go back to who I'd been before that moment, before I'd sent that photo, before I'd made the catastrophic mistake that was about to change everything. The elevator doors slid open with a soft whisper, and as I stepped inside, I caught my reflection in the polished metal walls, and what I saw was a woman on the precipice of something terrifying and dangerous and absolutely unknown. And I had no idea that this moment, this terrifying, anxiety-inducing, utterly devastating moment of ascending toward an unknown fate, was actually the moment my entire life began to transform into something darker and more intense and infinitely more real than anything I'd ever experienced before. The elevator climbs toward the executive penthouse with an agonizing slowness that makes me acutely aware of every single heartbeat, every ragged breath, every tremor in my hands that I press against my thighs to try to make them stop shaking. And I watch the numbers climb, 15, 16, 17, and with each passing floor I feel something inside me constricting, tightening, transforming the anxiety into something darker and more primal. Something that tastes like fear but also like anticipation in a way that I don't want to acknowledge or examine too closely. My reflection stares back at me from the polished elevator walls, and the woman looking back seems almost like a stranger, someone with wide eyes and flushed cheeks, and the kind of raw vulnerability written across her entire face that screams that she's made a terrible mistake and is about to pay for it in ways she can't even begin to imagine. The elevator finally arrives at the top floor with a soft chime that sounds obscenely cheerful, given the circumstances, and the doors slide open to reveal a corridor that looks like something out of a luxury magazine, all sleek, minimalist design and carefully curated modern art, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcase a view of the city that takes my breath away in spite of the absolute terror flooding through my veins. A woman in a perfectly tailored suit stands waiting for me, her expression professionally neutral in a way that suggests she's done this 1,000 times before, and she gestures silently toward a set of double doors at the end of the corridor, her eyes never meeting mine, which somehow makes this entire situation feel even more surreal and terrifying, because it's clear that whatever is about to happen is routine for her, is just another Tuesday in a world that I didn't even know existed until approximately 48 hours ago. My legs feel like they don't quite belong to me as I walk toward those doors, my professional heels clicking against the marble floor in a way that sounds obscenely loud in the silence of this space. And I'm hyper-aware of every movement my body makes, every breath I take, every second that passes as I get closer to whatever, or whoever, is waiting for me on the other side of those doors. The woman knocks twice, waits for a response that I can't hear from where I'm standing, and then pulls open one of the doors to reveal an office that is so ostentatiously powerful that it makes my knees feel weak and uncertain. The penthouse office is massive in a way that seems almost impossible, with walls of glass that overlook the entire city, and the man sitting behind the desk is so devastatingly, impossibly beautiful in that dangerous way that makes your instincts scream at you to run and simultaneously makes you want to move closer, is regarding me with eyes that are such a dark brown. They're almost black. And there's something in his expression that tells me he's been expecting me, that he knew exactly what I would do when I received that calendar invitation, that he's 3 moves ahead of me in a game I didn't even know I was playing until approximately 1 minute ago. He's wearing a 3-piece suit in charcoal gray that probably costs more than my monthly rent, and there's something about the way he wears it, the way he carries the absolute power and authority that seems to radiate from him like heat, that makes it clear this man is used to getting exactly what he wants, exactly when he wants it. And the thought of being in the same room as someone with that kind of raw power makes my mouth go dry, and my pulse start racing in a way that I absolutely cannot explain or control. "Miss Elena," he says, and the way he says my name is like a caress and a threat all at once. His voice deep and smooth and carrying an accent that I can't quite place. Something European, maybe. Something that suggests a life lived in places far more dangerous than the office park where I've been working. And I realize with a jolt that he knows my name, that he's clearly done research on me, that I'm not some random woman who made a careless mistake, but rather someone he's been watching, cataloging, learning about in ways that make my skin prickle with a mixture of fear and something else. Something I don't want to name or acknowledge. "Please, sit down," he continues, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. And I walk over on legs that feel like they might give out at any moment and lower myself into the chair, my hands gripping the arms so tightly that I think I might actually leave impressions in the leather if I hold on any longer. He leans back in his own chair with the kind of casual confidence that only comes from being accustomed to absolute power, and he steeples his fingers in front of his face, studying me with an intensity that makes me feel completely exposed, like he can see right through my professional clothing and my carefully constructed facade into all the darkest, most secret parts of myself that I don't even acknowledge in the privacy of my own mind. "I received an interesting photograph a couple of nights ago," he says, and the way he emphasizes that word, interesting, sends shivers cascading down my spine because it's the exact word from the message, the exact word that's been haunting me for 48 hours. And I know in that moment that there's absolutely no doubt, no possibility of misunderstanding or confusion, that this man, this dangerous, powerful man sitting behind this obscenely expensive desk, is the one who received my photo. And the realization crashes over me like a physical wave that nearly knocks the breath from my lungs. "I assume you didn't intend for me to receive it," he continues, and there's something almost amused in his tone, something that suggests he finds this entire situation entertaining in a way that makes me feel like I'm the punchline to a joke that I don't understand, like I'm a small, insignificant person caught up in the machinations of someone far more intelligent and far more dangerous than I could ever hope to be. Unless, of course, you've been planning some elaborate way to get my attention, which would suggest a level of forethought and cunning that I suspect you don't actually possess. But I could be wrong about that, and I'm certainly willing to be surprised. I open my mouth to speak, to explain, to apologize profusely and promise to do anything he asks if he'll just delete the photo and pretend this never happened, but nothing comes out except a small, pathetic sound that might be a whimper, or might be a sob, or might be some combination of the two. And I realize with absolute horror that I'm trembling, that my eyes are filling with tears, that I'm about to have an emotional breakdown in front of one of the most powerful men in the city, in the country, probably, based on the way he carries himself, and the way those women in the corridor treated him like he was a god or a king, or something even more terrifying than that. "I'm so sorry," I finally managed to choke out, my voice shaky and small and nothing like the confident, professional woman I usually am in these kinds of situations. And I hate myself for how weak I sound, how vulnerable, how absolutely pathetic I must appear to him. It was a mistake. I was trying to send it to someone else. I didn't even know whose number that was, and I just really need you to delete it, please. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Just please delete it, and we can pretend this never happened. He's silent for a long moment, just watching me with those dark eyes that seem to see everything, seem to catalog every single weakness and vulnerability and fear that I'm broadcasting to him like some kind of distress signal. And then he leans forward, his elbows on the desk, his fingers steepled in front of his face again. And there's something in his expression that's shifted, something that's become predatory and focused and absolutely terrifying in a way that makes my heart start hammering even faster, if that's even possible. "Do you know what I do for a living, Elena?" he asks, and the question seems almost rhetorical. Seems like he's asking it not because he actually wants an answer, but because he wants me to sit with the question, to really think about what my presence here in this office, in this building, in the presence of this man, actually means. Do you know why I exist in the capacity that I do? Why I have access to things like direct phone lines that I can give out to people in my organization? Why people in this office look at me the way they do when they think no one is watching? He pauses, letting the weight of those questions hang in the air between us, and I realize with growing dread that he's not talking about being an executive or a CEO or any kind of legitimate business endeavor, but rather something darker, something more dangerous, something that exists in the shadows of society and operates by rules that I couldn't even begin to understand or comprehend. "I don't actually care what you were trying to do, or who you were trying to send that photo to," he continues, and his voice has taken on a tone that's almost conversational, almost kind, which is somehow infinitely more terrifying than if he'd shouted at me or threatened me or done any of the things my panicked mind had been imagining. "What I care about is that I've been aware of you for quite some time now, that I arranged for you to be hired at this company specifically so that I could watch you, so that I could understand what kind of woman you are, what drives you, what makes you tick. And then, almost miraculously, you sent me a photograph that confirmed all of my suspicions about who you are and what you're capable of being if you ever actually decided to stop hiding behind professionalism and mediocrity and fear." The words hit me like physical blows, and I feel the color drain from my face as I process what he's saying, the implications of what he's telling me, the realization that this wasn't an accident at all from his perspective, that somehow I've been walking into this, that every single moment of my employment at this company has been part of some larger plan that I wasn't even aware was happening around me. "You've been watching me?" I whisper, and the words sound so small and insignificant in the cavernous space of this office, and I feel a spike of fear shoot through me that's almost equal parts terror and something else. Something dark and thrilling and absolutely wrong that I can't quite identify or name. "How long?" He smiles then, a smile that doesn't reach his eyes, a smile that's pure predator, pure danger, and it transforms his entire face into something beautiful and terrible and absolutely mesmerizing in a way that makes my stomach clench and my breathing become shallow and rapid. "Since you walked into the office for your first day of work, now stand up," he says, and the command in his voice is absolute, is not a request but an order, and I find myself standing without even consciously deciding to do so, my body responding to his authority in a way that my mind is still catching up to. He walks around the desk toward me, and with every step he takes, my anxiety ratchets up another notch, every instinct screaming at me to run, to get away, to put as much distance as possible between myself and this beautiful, dangerous man who has revealed that I've been a subject of his observation and whatever passes for interest in his dark world. He stops directly in front of me, close enough that I can smell his cologne, something dark and expensive and intoxicating, and he reaches, up and traces one finger along my jawline. And the touch is so gentle, so at odds with the intensity of his gaze and the predatory nature of his movements, that it makes me feel like I'm trapped in some kind of dream that's rapidly turning into a nightmare that I can't escape from. You're going to have dinner with me tonight, at a place where we can talk without any interruptions, without any pretense, without any of the careful facades that we both maintain in the daylight world, he says, his voice low and intimate in a way that makes my skin break out in goosebumps all across my body. And I know without any doubt that this isn't actually a request, that I'm going to do exactly what he's asking because the alternative, whatever that might be, seems infinitely more terrifying than going along with whatever it is he's planning. A car will pick you up at your apartment at 8 o'clock tonight, and you're going to dress in something that showcases how you looked in that photograph. Because I want you to understand that you're not hiding anymore. That whatever you've been keeping locked away inside yourself is exactly what I've been waiting for. And tonight is the beginning of everything changing for you in ways that you can't even imagine yet. I'm nodding before I even realize what I'm doing, my body agreeing to something that my mind is screaming warnings about. And he steps back from me with a satisfied expression, returning to his desk like the conversation is over, like he's simply ordered supplies for the office instead of fundamentally altering the trajectory of my entire life, with a few carefully chosen words. You can go back to work now, he says dismissively, not even looking at me. And I somehow manage to walk out of his office on legs that feel like they belong to someone else, down the corridor, into the elevator, and back down to the world of spreadsheets and fluorescent lighting, all the while knowing with absolute certainty that nothing in my life will ever be normal or safe or simple ever again, and that the woman who walked into that elevator this morning has already ceased to exist, and something darker and more dangerous and infinitely more real has already begun to take her place. By the time I'm sitting back at my desk, trying to focus on my work while my entire body is vibrating with anxiety and anticipation and a dark excitement that I absolutely cannot explain or justify, my phone buzzes with a text message from an unknown number that simply reads, "Looking forward to tonight. Don't be late." And I realize, staring at those 9 words, that I've crossed some kind of invisible threshold, that I've stepped into a world that exists just beyond the boundaries of normal society, and that whatever happens between now and 8 o'clock when that car arrives is going to determine the rest of my life in ways that I'm only beginning to comprehend. The hours between receiving that text message and 8 o'clock arrive with the kind of excruciating slowness that makes me feel like time itself has been manipulated. Like someone has pressed pause on the entire universe and is watching me spiral and overthink and question every single decision that's led me to this moment. And I go through the motions of my workday like an automaton, answering emails and scheduling meetings and pretending that I'm not completely falling apart on the inside, while maintaining a facade of professional competence on the outside. My hands shake as I leave the office at 5:30, and I drive home in a daze, my mind running through 1,000 different scenarios, 1,000 different ways this evening could go, and none of them involve me walking away unscathed or unchanged, or anything resembling the woman I was this morning when I got dressed in my normal professional clothes, and my normal professional mindset, and my normal, uncomplicated life. By the time I'm standing in front of my bedroom closet, staring at the clothes hanging there like they belong to someone else entirely, I realize that I have absolutely no idea what one wears to have dinner with a man who's just revealed that he's been orchestrating your life like a puppet master, a man who's beautiful and dangerous and completely in control of every single variable, including me and my choices and my apparent inability to say no to anything he asks of me. I eventually settle on a deep emerald dress that I bought on impulse months ago, but have never worn because I thought it was too revealing, too bold, too much of a statement that suggests I'm the kind of woman who takes risks and demands attention. And as I pull it over my body, I realize that this is exactly what he was talking about. This is the kind of energy he saw in that photograph. The part of me that I've been suppressing and hiding and pretending doesn't exist because it's dangerous and unpredictable and threatens everything I've tried to build for myself in terms of a stable, manageable, appropriately professional existence. The dress fits like it was made for this exact moment, hugging my curves in a way that's sensual without being overtly sexual. and I pair it with heels that make me feel taller and more confident and slightly more capable of handling whatever this evening is going to throw at me. Though deep down, I know that no amount of clothing or confidence or preparation could possibly prepare me for what's coming. My phone buzzes at exactly 7:55, and there's a text message from an unknown number, presumably his driver, saying that the car is downstairs, waiting. And I take one last look at myself in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back. This version of me with my hair styled in waves that frame my face, my makeup carefully applied to enhance my features, my entire presentation screaming that I'm ready to walk into something dangerous and that I'm doing it anyway, because some part of me, some dark part that I'm only just beginning to acknowledge, actually wants to. The car is a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows that makes me feel like I'm being transported into another world entirely, separated from the normal flow of traffic and the normal rules of society. And as we drive through the city, I'm acutely aware of being contained, trapped, transported to wherever he's decided our evening should take place. And there's something thrilling about that loss of control, something that makes my pulse race and my skin feel sensitive and my entire body feel hyper-aware of every single sensation. We eventually arrive at a restaurant that I've never heard of and would never be able to afford on my own. The kind of place that has no sign indicating what it is, just a sleek black door with a small brass plate. And the driver escorts me inside to discover an intimate space that's elegant and sophisticated and completely empty except for one table, set for two, with candles and wine and a view of the city that makes it feel like we're suspended above the world, looking down on everyone else like we exist on a different plane of existence altogether. He's already waiting, dressed in a black suit that's probably worth more than my car, and he stands when I approach the table, pulling out my chair with a courtesy that seems almost at odds with the predatory nature of his gaze as he takes in every detail of my appearance, and I can feel his eyes on me like a physical touch as I sit down. And there's something in his expression that tells me I've made the right choice in dressing this way, that I've given him exactly what he wanted to see. "You're beautiful," he says simply, and the words are delivered without any flourish or embellishment, just a statement of fact. And there's something in the way he says it that makes it feel less like a compliment and more like an assessment, an acknowledgement of something he already knew. And I find myself blushing despite my best efforts to remain composed and in control of my own emotional responses. "Thank you," I respond, my voice steadier than I expected it to be, and we begin to eat. And the conversation flows between us with an ease that surprises me given the circumstances, given that this man is essentially a stranger who's revealed that he's been watching me, orchestrating my life, and yet somehow when we talk it feels natural, feels like we've been doing this for years, instead of this being our first real interaction in a context where I'm not terrified or completely overwhelmed by his power and his presence. He asks me questions about myself, where I grew up, what my family is like, what I want out of life, what I dream about when I'm alone at night. And I find myself answering honestly, revealing pieces of myself that I usually keep locked away. And with each answer I give, I feel like I'm giving him more power over me, more leverage, more of a hold on my life and my choices and my future. And yet I can't seem to stop myself from continuing to bare my soul to him. "Your life before now was small," he says at one point, his dark eyes studying me across the candlelit table with an intensity that makes my breath catch in my throat. "But not because you lack the capacity for something larger, something more dangerous, something more real. It's because you were afraid of what that would mean about yourself, what it would say about who you are if you actually allowed yourself to want things that society tells us we shouldn't want, to desire things that are dark and complicated and morally ambiguous." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, because they're true, because they articulate something that I've felt in my deepest self, but have never been able to voice or even admit to consciously acknowledging. And I realize that he's not just watching me physically. He's watching me psychologically. understanding me in ways that I don't even understand myself. And that realization should terrify me, but instead it's making me feel things that I absolutely should not be feeling. I don't know who you are, I say, the words tumbling out before I can stop them. I don't know what you do or who you work for or why you're interested in me, and I'm terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. But I'm also... I pause, struggling to find the words to articulate the complex mixture of emotions churning through me. I'm also more alive right now than I've ever been in my entire life. He reaches across the table and takes my hand, his touch warm and possessive and commanding in a way that makes my entire body respond. And he brings my hand to his mouth and presses a kiss against my palm that feels like a brand, like he's marking me as his, claiming me in some fundamental way that goes beyond the physical into something deeper and darker and infinitely more dangerous. Good, he says simply, because being with me, being part of my world, is going to require that you're alive in that way, that you're willing to cross lines that you've never crossed before, that you're willing to acknowledge the parts of yourself that you've been taught to suppress since childhood. And I promise you, Elena, that if you're willing to do those things, if you're willing to take that risk, then I will show you a version of yourself that you never even knew existed. We finish dinner, and he takes me to his penthouse, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. And as we ride up in the elevator, I'm aware of a strange mixture of anticipation and terror running through my body, of knowing that something is about to happen. Something is about to cross from the realm of psychological games and flirtation into something physical and irreversible and absolutely transformative. His apartment is exactly what I would have expected if I'd had time to think about it. Expensive, minimalist, decorated with the kind of taste that suggests someone who knows exactly what they want and doesn't waste time or energy on anything superfluous or unnecessary. And there's a kind of raw power radiating from the space itself, like the walls have absorbed the dominance and control of the man who lives here and are now broadcasting it back out into the atmosphere. He takes me to the balcony and we stand together overlooking the city. The lights spread out below us like we're looking down at a different universe, a different world that exists just for us. And he stands behind me with his chest almost but not quite touching my back. And I can feel the heat radiating from his body, can feel the intensity of his presence. And my breathing becomes shallow and rapid and almost uncontrollable. I'm going to ruin you for anyone else, he whispers, his voice low and intimate and absolutely certain in a way that suggests this isn't a threat or a question, but a statement of fact, a declaration of intent. And I should be horrified. I should pull away. I should run screaming from this man, and his incredible presumption, and his casual ownership of my future. But instead I turn to face him, and I say yes, before I can stop myself, before I can think about what that word actually means, or what it's going to cost me. And his smile is predatory, and satisfied, and absolutely beautiful in its darkness. What happens next is almost a blur of sensation and emotion and a kind of physicality that feels unlike anything I've ever experienced before. Because it's not just about bodies touching, it's about power and control and submission and the strange eroticism of giving yourself over completely to someone else, of allowing yourself to be claimed and owned and transformed in ways that feel both terrifying and absolutely thrilling all at once. We end up in his bedroom, which is as carefully curated and controlled as the rest of his space, and every touch feels intentional. Every kiss feels like a chess move in a game that only he understands the rules to. And I find myself responding to his dominance with a kind of abandon that I never knew I was capable of, surrendering to him in ways that feel like I'm drowning, but also like I'm finally learning how to breathe. Afterwards, as we lie tangled together in his expensive sheets, with his arm wrapped possessively around my waist and his lips pressed against my shoulder, I realize that I've crossed a line tonight that I can never uncross, that I've given him access to parts of myself that I can never take back. and the knowledge should terrify me, but instead it's making me feel something close to peace. Like I've finally found where I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, even if that somewhere and that something exists in the shadows and the darkness and the dangerous spaces that I've been taught my entire life to avoid. He's silent for a long time, just holding me, and I can feel his heartbeat against my back, steady and controlled, and absolutely certain in a way that makes me understand that this is normal for him, that taking women and transforming them is just something he does, part of his collection of power and control, and that realization should hurt. But instead, it's making me feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, like I'm fulfilling some fundamental purpose that I've been searching for my entire life. "Tomorrow you're going to come work for me," he says finally, his voice carrying the kind of absolute certainty that suggests there's no possibility of me saying no. And I realize that he's not talking about the legitimate office where I've been working, but rather something else. Something darker. Something that exists in the world he occupies and controls completely. "You'll work for me directly, handle my scheduling, manage my communications, and in exchange, you'll have access to a world that most people don't even know exists, and you'll be mine in a way that no one else will ever be able to claim you." I should ask questions. I should demand clarification. I should protect myself in some fundamental way. But instead I just nod against his chest and whisper, "Okay," into the darkness. And as I drift off to sleep, I'm aware of the fact that my life has fundamentally, irrevocably changed, that I'm no longer the woman who walked into that penthouse office this morning, and that the woman I'm becoming is someone darker, someone more dangerous, someone who understands that the line between love and obsession, between desire and destruction, is far thinner than I ever believed it to be. When I wake up the next morning, he's already gone, and there's a black credit card on the pillow next to me with a note attached that says simply, "Buy whatever you need. His office is expecting you at 9. And as I hold that card in my trembling hands, understanding what it represents, understanding the weight of the commitment I've just made by lying in this bed, by surrendering to him, by saying yes to a future that I can't even begin to comprehend, I realize that I'm no longer just a woman who made a careless mistake with a photograph. I'm someone who's chosen to walk deliberately into the darkness, and there's no going back from that choice. Not now, not ever. 3 weeks into working directly for him, I've learned more about the architecture of violence, power, and corruption than most people learn in an entire lifetime. And I'm sitting in his office on a Tuesday afternoon, watching him conduct a meeting with men who have the kind of scars and the kind of cold eyes that suggest they've done things that would make normal people lose sleep. And I'm taking notes on his scheduling, managing his communications, existing in a space that exists just beyond the law in every single way imaginable. And the most terrifying part is that I'm starting to feel comfortable here, starting to understand the logic of this world, starting to comprehend that there's a kind of brutal honesty to operating in the shadows that's infinitely more authentic than anything I experienced in the legitimate world of spreadsheets and corporate policies. He treats me differently in the office than he does when we're alone, maintaining a professional distance that's both a relief and a kind of torture, because every interaction is charged with the memory of how his hands feel on my skin, how his voice sounds when he's commanding me to do things, how completely and utterly I've surrendered control of my life to this man who still remains, in many ways, a complete and utter stranger to me. The men he meets with look at me with a mixture of respect and something darker, something that suggests they understand exactly what I am to him, exactly what my presence means, and there's a part of me that takes a twisted satisfaction in that enjoys being marked as his, that has begun to understand that being his possession is infinitely more empowering than trying to maintain some kind of independence in a world where I have none. I've stopped asking questions about what he does, stopped trying to maintain some kind of moral distinction between who I was and who I'm becoming, because every time I try to hold on to that distinction, he simply smiles at me in that predatory way and reminds me of the choice I made, reminds me that I walked into this with open eyes, reminds me that the woman I was before no longer exists and cannot be resurrected no matter how much I might sometimes miss her in my weakest moments. My apartment has been emptied, my possessions relocated to a room in his penthouse that's been transformed into a space that's both luxurious and utterly controlled, where every item has been curated to reflect what he believes I should want, should need, should desire, and I've stopped fighting the loss of autonomy, because fighting it only exhausts me and makes him more possessive, more controlling, more determined to erase any remaining vestige of the woman I used to be. The money he gives me is obscene, far more than I could ever spend, and I've stopped questioning where it comes from or what it represents because the answer is obvious. It's blood money. It's the currency of an empire built on things that polite society doesn't acknowledge, and accepting it means that I'm complicit in ways that I can't undo, even if I wanted to escape, which I'm increasingly uncertain that I actually do. Everything changes on a Thursday evening when I'm sorting through his schedule, and I notice a series of meetings that aren't labeled, that carry no context, that exist in his calendar marked only with a time and a location. And when I ask him about them, he smiles that dangerous smile and tells me that tonight I'm going to see a different side of his world, a side that will determine whether I'm actually capable of being with him in the way he needs me to be, or whether I'm just a temporary distraction, a woman who enjoys the fantasy of darkness but doesn't have the strength to actually live in it. We drive to a warehouse in the Mafia industrial district, a place that exists just at the edge of the city, where the law enforcement presence is minimal, and the kinds of activities that happen here are the things that nightmares are made of. And he takes my hand as we walk inside, his touch grounding me even as my anxiety ratchets up to levels that make my vision blur slightly at the edges. The warehouse is massive, and in the center there's a man bound to a chair, surrounded by his men, and I realize with a sickening jolt that I'm about to witness something violent, something terrible, something that will change me in fundamental ways that I might not be able to recover from. And my instinct is to run, to scream, to do anything except stand here and watch what's about to unfold. "This man," he says, gesturing toward the bound man with casual indifference, "has been stealing from me, has been attempting to move into territory that belongs to me, has been in essence declaring war on my organization. And there are consequences for those things, Elena. Consequences that exist outside of the legal system, because the legal system is a joke, because power is the only currency that actually matters, and this man has miscalculated his place in the hierarchy, and now he's going to pay the price." The bound man looks at me with an expression that's a mixture of fear and something else. Something like he's hoping I'll intercede, that I'll beg for mercy, that I'll prove to be some kind of humanizing force in this situation. But he doesn't understand yet that I've already made my choice, that I've already sacrificed my humanity on the altar of my desire for this man and the intoxicating power he represents. I should look away, should close my eyes, should find some way to mentally separate myself from what's about to happen, but instead I find myself stepping closer, find myself wanting to understand, find myself becoming aroused by the raw exercise of power, by the absolute control he's displaying, by the knowledge that this man is capable of anything, and that I'm choosing to stay anyway. The violence, when it comes, is efficient and brutal and absolutely devastating, and I watch as his men break the bound man's fingers one at a time, as they extract information through methods that I don't want to understand, as they demonstrate in absolutely clear terms what happens to people who challenge his authority. And I'm shaking. I'm terrified. I'm also more turned on than I've ever been in my entire life, which is a realization that makes me understand that I'm losing whatever remained of my former self. Afterward, as we're driving back to the penthouse, he pulls me close and whispers that I passed, that I've proven that I'm capable of existing in his world, that I've demonstrated the kind of moral flexibility and the kind of willingness to accept his methods that suggests I might actually be the woman he's been looking for all along, and his praise feels like a drug, like the only thing that matters, like I would do anything, absolutely anything, to hear him say those words again. We make love that night with a kind of intensity that feels different, feels like I'm no longer just surrendering to him, but rather becoming him in some fundamental way. Like the boundaries between his darkness and my weakness are dissolving until I can no longer tell where he ends and I begin. And as we lay tangled together in the darkness, I realize that I've crossed a threshold tonight that I can never uncross, that I've participated in violence, that I've witnessed cruelty, and that I did nothing to stop it. He tells me later that week that there are people after him, that a rival family is moving against his organization, that the FBI is building a case. And the way he tells me this, with complete certainty that I'll stand by him, suggests that he understands something fundamental about me that I'm only just beginning to understand about myself, which is that I would choose him over morality, over safety, over the law itself. A month after the warehouse incident, he comes to me and tells me that he wants to marry me, that he needs to marry me, and the proposal is delivered not as a romantic gesture but as a strategic necessity, because a wife cannot testify against her husband in most circumstances, because having me legally bound to him is another layer of insurance, another way to ensure my absolute loyalty. And I should be horrified by the calculated nature of this proposal, should recognize it as manipulation and control. And yet when I say yes, it feels like the most genuine decision I've made since I sent that photograph to the wrong number what feels like a lifetime ago. The wedding is small and intimate and utterly dark, held in a private chapel at midnight, with only his most trusted men present. And when he places the ring on my finger, I feel like I'm being branded, claimed, transformed into something that belongs to him completely and utterly. And the vows we exchange are half promise and half threat, acknowledging the darkness between us, while also acknowledging that we're choosing to remain in this darkness together. Everything explodes into chaos on our wedding night, when his penthouse is attacked, when there's gunfire and explosions and the kind of violent intrusion that makes it clear that the rival family has made their move, that the protection he's promised me is being tested in real time. And I'm cowering in his bedroom while the sounds of violence rage throughout his home, and I realize that I've made a choice that's going to cost me everything, that I've entered a world where safety is an illusion, and death is always just around the corner. He comes for me, blood spattered across his white dress shirt, his face cold and focused and absolutely deadly. And he tells me that we have to move now, that we have to leave through the emergency exit, that our life is about to become something far more unstable and dangerous than anything we've experienced thus far. As we're running through the corridors of his penthouse, trying to escape the violence that's erupting around us, I see one of his men get shot, see him fall to the ground, and in that moment I'm faced with a choice. I can keep running, can save myself, or I can help this man who's dying on the floor, who's part of the organization that I've chosen to become part of, and without even thinking about it, without consciously making the decision, I move toward him. I tell him to hold on. I try to do something, anything, to stop the bleeding and save his life. He's the one who shoots the person about to execute me, the one who pulls me away from the dying man and tells me to run, the one who forces me to move forward into the darkness of the stairwell and away from the only light I could see. And it's in that moment, covered in someone else's blood, having just tried to save a man I don't even know because he belongs to the organization I've become part of, that I realize I've become complicit in ways that I can never undo, that I've crossed lines that make me not a victim but a perpetrator, not an innocent bystander but an active participant in this dark world. We make it to a safe house on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling property that's designed for exactly these kinds of situations, and he pulls me into the bathroom and washes the blood off my skin with a tenderness that's almost obscene given the violence that preceded it. And as he's cleaning my hands, my arms, my face, I'm staring at myself in the mirror, and I barely recognize the woman staring back, because that woman has killed, has participated in violence, has chosen love and darkness over morality and safety, and everything I was taught to value. He stands in front of me in that bathroom, water still dripping from his hair, fresh clothes covering the blood that had been on his skin moments before, and he takes my face in his hands and tells me that I'm one of them now, that there's no going back, that I've been forged in the fire of violence and have emerged stronger on the other side, And when I look into his eyes, I see absolute certainty, absolute possession, absolute love mixed with absolute danger. And I understand that this moment, covered in blood, standing in a safe house, married to a man who operates in the shadows, this moment is the culmination of everything that began when I accidentally sent that photograph to the wrong number, and that whatever comes next, whatever happens in the final chapter of this story, it will be written in the language of love and violence and the blurred lines between righteousness and destruction. 3 months into hiding in the safe house, surrounded by walls that are designed to keep the world out and keep me in, I'm standing in front of the bathroom mirror at 3 in the morning, watching my hands shake as I hold a positive pregnancy test, understanding with a clarity that feels almost violent in its intensity that I'm about to create a new life in a world of blood and shadows and moral ambiguity, and the realization crashes over me like a wave that's designed to drown me, to force me to confront the magnitude of the choices I've made, to understand that I can no longer hide behind the excuse of desire or manipulation or even love, because I'm about to bring an innocent human being into this darkness. I've been running from the truth of who I've become for months now, telling myself that I was seduced, that I was manipulated, that I didn't have a choice but standing here holding this test, understanding that I'm going to be responsible for another person's well-being and safety in a world that offers neither. I'm finally forced to acknowledge that every single thing that's happened to me since I sent that photograph has been a result of choices I made, lines I crossed consciously and deliberately, despite knowing exactly what those choices would cost me and everyone around me. He finds me in the bathroom and pulls me close without asking questions. And when I show him the test, his expression shifts from the cold dominance that's become his default state into something that looks almost like vulnerability, almost like the man he might have been if the world hadn't forged him into a weapon. And he whispers against my hair that this changes everything, that he's going to protect this child in ways that he's never protected anything in his entire life. And there's such raw intensity in those words that I almost believe him. Almost believe that he's capable of being something other than a predator. Almost believe that love could somehow exist in the spaces between his violence and my complicity. But the next morning brings FBI agents to our safe house, brings the reality of his world crashing down on us with the force of a building collapsing, because apparently they've been tracking us through the financial transactions he authorized for my care, through the digital footprints that exist even in the shadows, and they're offering me a deal. Immunity, protection, a new life, in exchange for testimony that will dismantle everything he's built, everything he is, everything we've become together. I'm sitting across from them in a sterile interrogation room, and they're showing me photographs of the men he's hurt, the organizations he's destroyed, the violence that radiates out from him like radiation poisoning everyone it touches. And they're telling me that I can save myself, that I can save my child, that I can escape this life if I'm willing to betray him. And the seductive nature of that offer is almost impossible to resist because it represents everything I thought I wanted. Safety, stability, a return to some kind of normalcy that no longer exists and probably never did. But when I try to form the words to agree, when I try to betray him in exchange for my freedom, I find that I can't. That something inside me has been fundamentally rewired by months of intimacy and darkness and the understanding that he's loved me in the only way he knows how, which is possessively and dangerously, and with a kind of absolute certainty that makes everything else seem pale and insignificant by comparison. I tell the agents that I want a lawyer, that I'm not saying anything without representation, and the triumph in the interrogation room evaporates because they suddenly understand that I've made my choice, that despite everything they're offering me, I'm choosing to remain in the darkness with him, and the look on the lead agent's face suggests that he recognizes something in me, some fundamental transformation that's occurred, some crossing of lines that can't be uncrossed even if I were willing to try. They release me because they have no evidence against me, because I haven't technically committed any crimes, because the law operates in shades of gray that don't capture the true nature of my guilt and complicity. And I walk out of that building knowing that my choice to protect him has just guaranteed my destruction, has just written a future for my child that will be lived in the margins of society, in the spaces where normal rules don't apply. He's waiting for me outside, having paid off someone inside the FBI or the state police or some other layer of law enforcement that operates with the kind of corruption that makes the entire system a joke. And when he sees me, his expression transforms into something almost like relief, almost like love, almost like he believed I would betray him, and is genuinely shocked to discover that I haven't. I tell him about the pregnancy as we're driving back to the safe house, and instead of responding with joy or concern or any of the things I expected, he grows very quiet, very still, and his hands grip the steering wheel so tightly that I think he might break it. And when he finally speaks, his voice is devastated in a way that I've never heard it before. "You should have taken the deal," he says, and the words hang in the car like a curse, like a condemnation, like something that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life, and I'm confused, I'm devastated, I'm absolutely certain that I've misunderstood him until he continues, explaining that he's been operating under the assumption that I would leave if given the chance, that he's been waiting for me to recognize the magnitude of my mistake, that he's been terrified that one day I would wake up and realize that I sacrificed everything for a man who is fundamentally incapable of giving me anything except pain and danger, and a life lived in perpetual fear. "I love you," he says, and the words sound like an apology. "But I'm not good for you, and I've been selfish in keeping you with me, in letting you become this. And now you're pregnant, and you've destroyed any chance you had of escaping. And that's on me. That's my fault. And I don't know if I can forgive myself for that." This vulnerability, this crack in his armor, this moment of genuine humanity, is somehow more devastating than any violence. And I find myself defending him to him, telling him that I made my own choices, that I'm not his victim, even though every part of our relationship has been built on power imbalances and manipulation and control. And he pulls the car over and looks at me with such raw pain in his eyes that I understand he's been carrying the weight of my transformation this entire time, understanding that he's created me, molded me, turned me into a version of myself that can never return to innocence. "I'm going to extract myself from the organization," he says, and the words sound impossible, sound like a fantasy, sound like something that men like him don't actually get to do. Not completely, because that kind of power doesn't just disappear, but enough that I can try to build something with you, something that isn't just built on violence and possession, something that's actually real. The next few months are a strange kind of honeymoon period, where he begins the complicated process of delegating his empire to trusted lieutenants, where he starts distancing himself from the most violent aspects of his operation, where he makes a genuine effort to become something other than a predator. And I'm watching this transformation with a mixture of hope and skepticism, because I understand that people don't change at their core, that the darkness that created him is still there, still influencing every decision he makes, and yet I also understand that he's trying, that he's making genuine sacrifices, that he's attempting to become worthy of the love I've given him, even though love and worthiness aren't actually connected in any meaningful way. We move out of the safe house and into a legitimate mansion in a wealthy suburb, and I'm pregnant and married and living something that almost resembles a normal life, except that it's absolutely nothing like normal, because normal doesn't involve knowing that your husband has killed people. Normal doesn't involve understanding that your child will grow up with that weight. Normal doesn't involve the constant awareness that violence could erupt at any moment, because that's the world we inhabit. When our daughter is born, on a cold morning in February, something shifts in him that I didn't expect, didn't anticipate, didn't believe was actually possible. He holds her with a kind of reverence and tenderness that suggests he's making a promise to himself and to her that he's going to be better, be different, be the kind of man who can give her something other than violence and darkness and the inheritance of his sins. I watch him with our daughter, and I see glimpses of the man he might have been in a different life, might have become if different circumstances had shaped his childhood, might have remained if the world hadn't forced him to become a weapon. And I realize that I love him not, despite his darkness, but because of how hard he's fighting against it, because he's choosing every single day to be better. And that's a kind of love that's infinitely more real than the intoxicating attraction that first drew me to him. But I'm also exhausted, emotionally and spiritually destroyed by the weight of what I've become, haunted by the faces of people who've been hurt, traumatized by the violence I've witnessed, devastated by the understanding that I can never go back to being the woman I was before I sent that photograph to the wrong number. And one night after she's asleep, I find myself washing my hands over and over again, trying to clean away the blood that's not actually there but that I can still feel on my skin. And I have a moment of absolute clarity where I understand that I'm not healed, that I'm not healthy, that I'm existing in a state of profound psychological fracture that's only being held together by the thread of my love for him and my responsibility to our daughter. I tell him that I need help, that I need to see someone, that I need to acknowledge the trauma of what I've experienced and what I've become, and instead of the dismissal or the possessiveness I expected, he arranges for a therapist, carefully vetted and absolutely bound by confidentiality, to come to our home. And I begin the long, painful process of trying to understand how I became this person, trying to reconcile the woman I was with the woman I've become, trying to find some kind of peace in the understanding that transformation doesn't erase the past, it just provides tools for living with it. Sitting in my therapist's office, which is actually our guest house, because even my mental health care exists within the carefully controlled world he's created, I begin to understand that I was never just a victim of his manipulation, that I was searching for something dark, something dangerous, something that would break the monotony of my carefully controlled existence, and that he simply provided what I was subconsciously desperate to find. And that understanding is both liberating and absolutely devastating, because it means I have to take full responsibility for the choices I've made, for the person I've become, for the kind of example I'm setting for my daughter. I also begin to understand that while his love for me is real, it's also conditional, it's also possessive, it's also structured in ways that ensure my continued dependence on him, and that understanding doesn't make me stop loving him. Because love isn't rational or conditional or even healthy. Love is just the thing that keeps me tethered to him, despite knowing exactly how dangerous that connection is. 1 year after our daughter is born, I'm standing on the balcony of our mansion, overlooking the grounds where she's playing, where she's running through grass and laughing in that pure way that only children can laugh. And he comes up behind me and wraps his arms around me and whispers that he's proud of me, that he loves me, that he's sorry for everything. And I realize that apologies don't actually undo anything, that love doesn't erase violence, that transformation is ongoing and never complete and always complicated. But standing here, watching our daughter play, feeling his arms around me, understanding that we're monsters together, understanding that we're trying to be better, understanding that the line between victim and perpetrator has become so blurred that I can no longer distinguish between the two, I make peace with the fact that this is my life. This is who I am. And there's a strange kind of beauty in accepting the darkness rather than fighting it, in choosing love despite knowing all the ways it can destroy me, in building a life with someone in the margins of society where normal rules don't apply, and the only thing that matters is that we're choosing to stay together. I think sometimes about the woman I was before I sent that photograph to the wrong number, and I feel compassion for her naivete, for her belief that she could control her own destiny, for her desire to feel powerful in a moment of vulnerability. And I understand that sending that photograph wasn't a mistake at all. It was an invitation, a calling out into the darkness, a desperate plea for someone to see me, to understand me, to transform me into something more real than the woman I was pretending to be. So I send that photograph out into the universe again, metaphorically, every single day when I choose to stay, when I choose to love him, when I choose to raise our daughter in the shadows. And I'm at peace with that choice, even though I know it's destroying me slowly, even though I know I'm teaching my daughter that love and violence are inextricably linked, even though I know that one day she'll grow up and understand exactly what her parents are and what we've done. and I hope that when that day comes, she'll understand that we loved her as fiercely as we knew how. Even if that love was built on foundations of darkness and destruction, and the beautiful, terrible, transformative power of choosing someone despite knowing exactly how dangerous that choice is. The woman who accidentally sent a sexy photo to the Mafia boss is long gone, replaced by someone stronger and darker and infinitely more real. And standing here on this balcony with my daughter laughing in the distance and the man I love holding me in the darkness, I understand that this is my happy ending. Not the fairy tale I was taught to expect, but the hard-won, painful, genuine conclusion to a story that began with one careless moment and transformed everything about who I am and who I've chosen to become.